Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Intelligent Reports and Dashboard session. We've been plagued a little bit with technical, interesting issues this morning, but with me, and I mean with me, we have Mr. Bucknall.
Indeed, we are talking not only cross-platform today, but cross-continent. Paul from Australia, Julian from, well, Colorado, I suppose. And we're here in the DevExpress offices in our conference room, side by side.
It makes a difference to actually have daylight during a presentation.
Oh, I suppose it would for you. Yes, it would. But yeah, the sun is out in LA, in Glendale, and we're here in a darkened room with lots of screens and technology around us because things have not been going well.
We'll see what happens. All right, let's move on to looking at what we're going to be talking about today. We'll whiz through a bit of an introduction on dashboards and reporting and some of the different terms that people use or different uses for them. We'll build out the Windows End User Report Designer and Dashboard Designer, showing you how to customize that whole experience to make it more branded for your business, and also how to lock things like your data source so that if you're providing an end user, they can only see data you want. We'll also have a bit of a debate on the merits of data access layers versus direct to SQL or direct to your database. We're going to have a quick look at showing dashboards inside web pages. We will discuss some of the other configuration options there, such as being able to hide the dashboard viewer if a dashboard doesn't exist based on, say, a parameter that you might pass into your website. And then Mr. Bucknall is going to do a official unveiling of the CTP version of our Web Dashboard Designer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite a
lot to get through, I'd say.
Yeah. Now, Julian, when we talk dashboards, I mean, I suppose the same thing happens with reports, because some people, one man's report is another man's Excel spreadsheet. But when we talk dashboards, what immediately springs to mind?
Well, in essence, what we're trying to do with dashboards and reports and all of those kinds of different things, well, you could also talk about pivot grids and so on and so forth. It's basically distilling your data, of which you presumably have thousands upon thousands of rows in hundreds of tables, into some kind of information that you can act on. It's all very well having lots of data, but you can't incorporate that data in some way in your own mind. You have to extract the vital information in that data out in some form. You have to show it in some kind of easily comprehensible, I should say, form. And what we're talking about here is visualizations of that data. And thank you for showing me the dashboard there, the dashboard viewer. The visualizations I'm talking about, things like charts and spark lines and gauges and all that kind of thing, where at a glance you can see, for example, in that line chart up there, we have peaks and troughs and the ability to, if you like, drill down into those items of information that are interesting. There's maps, we haven't got any on this particular screen at the moment, and so on and so forth. So if we look at the grid on the left-hand side there, we have, sparkline is just an ordinary bar showing an extent, and you can see relationships between different rows more easily than trying to read numbers. And then we have on the sales versus target thing, we have using custom formatting, the ability to show whether something's going up or going down. So we have green for going up and plus an up-ended arrow, and red for going down and a down pointing arrow. So all of these kinds of things help us, these visualizations help us understand the information that's there in our data. We're distilling that data down into information that we can look at. I'm glad you shared the financial dashboard. That's an excellent example. Finance is predicated on trying to understand the market, and you can't understand the market by looking at every single transaction that occurs in the market. You're going to be looking at trends in that data and especially with a nice blank bit in the middle there. What's that all about, Paul?
Yeah, there's a small issue with the candlestick data today, Julian. What is interesting here, I think you've hit the nail on the head, visualization of large volumes of data in a way that make it really easy. There's less cognitive load, to steal one of Mr. Miller's terms, when we're looking at something to go, wow, we're making money, we're losing money, and then I can drill down into that information if I need to.
Exactly. Yes.
What we can see here with the financial dashboard, if you were to view this on a tablet or a phone, you're going to have that nice interaction with the touch control. So there's no mouse, there's no scroll bars, you've got that nice look and feel. We did at the outset say that we're talking desktop, web, and mobile. So the viewer controls work across all the platforms, which is really nice.
Right.
Now, what is interesting as well, some people will use dashboards at another level. And I'm going to show you a photograph here of a business in Australia that have used the DevExpress controls in quite a unique way. In their operations room, they've got all these monitors showing every aspect of their business and whether it's running proactively or whether there's things that they need to take a look at with the red elements. And this information is updated in real time from other external systems. The beauty is that if they want to, they can also bring up any one of those dashboards on their PC and then drill down into a web page using the ASPX data grid. So there's a lot of really cool interaction from external party systems, data brought through, say, a data access layer, so not just accessing the database, and then showing that information on screen and having it that everybody can see exactly what's going on.
Exactly, and the nice thing about this particular photograph is showing that the information that's being displayed is very, very, very minimal. And you're basically struck with not necessarily the magnitude of the numbers, but you're struck by the green, meaning good, presumably, and the red, meaning, uh-oh, got to look at this and all that kind of stuff. And as you say, at a glance, you could see the, if you like, the health of the company, the health of its books, and as you say, if you need to, you can say, well, look at that second screen, the third, column there, that's a little dodgy, maybe I ought to go and have a look on my own screen and drill down into what that actually means, that number actually means.
Absolutely. Now the other thing I think is to consider, it's not just about developers bringing reports to end users, because reports are so subjective. What is meaningful to me may not be meaningful to you. So I think being able to offer the end user the ability to generate not only their own reports, but also their own dashboards really simply is a powerful thing.
Right.
And of course, if we consider the power behind the DevExpress reporting tools, there's a number of key things that we want to bring forward. The fact is that it's cross-platform. Right. So Win, ASP, WPF, dare I mention Silverlight, but not only do we have the viewer, we've also got the designer for different platforms. The reports work on sub-reports, drill downs, master details, labels, multi-column. They're scriptable. Right. Yet you can still ship a royalty-free end-user report designer and deliver that power to the end user. Now, what's really interesting is the fact that you can then brand and you can tie the report designer down so closely to your business and your data model that your customer's not left going, well, what is a connection string? Do I connect to Oracle or SQL? And that's one of the things that I want to just jump into Visual Studio and take a look at first of all.
And that's an important point, actually, is it's all very well giving the end user presumably your CXOs, your CEO, CTO, hello,
C-suites.
The ability to create dashboards and play around with dashboards, but you've got to try and hide the nitty-gritty of your data sources, your data servers and all the rest of it from them, providing another easy-to-understand interface for getting their data that they need to see.
Yeah, you don't need to see all 400 fields of the spreadsheet.
No.
You just need to see the 15 or so that are important to you.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is start with a Windows application, and I'm going to create a new Windows form. There's a couple of backup files here just in case. I did mention that we've been having some interesting technical quirks, but we'll start by calling this one JB Rep Des. So we'll pick on you today, Julian.
Okay.
and we're going to create just a nice simple Windows form. Inside here, I'm going to go to my toolbox and I'm going to type in report. And we can see I've got two choices. The standard report designer being traditional toolbars like we see inside Visual Studio, or the report designer.
The ribbon report designer.
The ribbon report designer. By dragging that into the full Visual Studio, and the templating is going to add all the necessary controls. And of course I can come along, change the icon of the form, I could change the name of the form, but in essence right now I'm done. If I'll make sure that that's the startup project, which it is, and I jump into the program CS, and let's change this to launch JB Rep Des, and we run that. What we're going to see without any code and within half a minute, a fully functioning end-user report designer. Now that comes complete with the scripting language and everything else that you've come to expect or you may have seen inside our tools. We've got our toolbox on the left, we've got our field list on the right, along with things like properties, report explorer. If I'm going to create a new report, I could do it via a wizard. Right. If I was going to step through via a wizard, you can programmatically change what is shown in this wizard. So you can lock this down, that instead of having the user step through all of these things, you can simply have it preset with your connection. I'm going to just step through all of this. In fact, I'm going to cancel the wizard. Don't tell anybody, but I'm not a fan of it. I like getting in straight into the
you
valves.
like the nitty-gritty, that's what it is.
And I'm going to add a new data source, set it up to be a database, and we'll go /SQL Express, and we'll choose the AdventureWorks database here. At this point, I'm going to run the query builder, and I'm going to choose a view, which is my salesperson view, and I can nominate what data I want to be shown or made available to the report. At this point, I can alias things, I can set up sorting, grouping. I'm going to keep it nice and simple and just say, bring everything across, and here's all my data. Now, today's session isn't to give you an in-depth view on the data or the report designer. It's just to give you a bit of an idea as to how you can customize things. So there's my report. And if I ran it inside the HTML viewer, it's going to show me what that would look like.
And that's the important thing about this. We're creating a template for the report. We're going to bind it to some data in some form, and that template plus the data can be viewed on any platform. And you just did that. You showed it on HTML.
And you'll see here, if I try and overlap some fields, I'm going to get a warning saying that this wouldn't work very well in a HTML view or an RTF or a CSV export. So there's some niceties built in. That in itself is fine. I mean, straightforward out-of-the-box reporting. You've got a rich set of controls here, all sorts of things, and we've certainly got some videos on the YouTube channel for that. But what happens if I want to maybe do something a little bit different and start binding or making it more interactive with my data? Now, what we'll do for a simple example is let's interact with a ribbon. Even though the ribbon's there and built for me, I can still control all of it. I can take away, I can add to it. So I'm going to come along and add a new button. Okay. We're going to call this button maybe bar button Julian.
All right.
And we will add a click event. Now, I wouldn't normally be adding this much code into a click event. It's, you know, I'm a big fan of reusable methods and clean methods, but for now, what I want to do is use the DevExpress extra reports, and we want the UI library and extra report. We'll call it report. We're going to create a new instance of that. Next, what I want to do, Julian, is, I'm sorry, let me step back a stage, because I've got a data layer here that I'm going to be playing with.
Okay.
Now, effectively, I want to bring some data in from a SQL server. So here I've just got a preset SQL string looking at some baseball data. Oh, okay. I've got a couple of helper methods that just help me make sure if I run into a DB null, I get a value type back, so there's nothing super hard there. And then I've got this data layer itself. Inside here, we've got a simple little class called player.
All right.
I've got 3 properties, first name, last name, and year of birth.
All right.
And then a constructor that takes a record set and populates those 3 properties on the construct from that. Nice and simple. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, that's as easy and clean as it should be. So for this particular example, what I want to do is bind that data set into my report so that all you can report on is that class.
Okay, it's first name, last name, year of birth. That's all you're going to expose to the end user in his design.
So we'll start out by just creating a generic, so a list of data layer.player, and we'll call that data. And we'll actually, because it was a shared method in our creation, I didn't show you that either, did I? Inside we've got a shared method here called getPlayerData.
All right.
It creates just a clean list.
Right.
It then uses the SQL connection wrapped up nice and cleanly, selects everything from players,
beautiful,
sets up the loop, and then adds those elements to the player class, returning it as an item. So again, straightforward. So at this point, I want to instantiate that with getPlayerData.
All right.
The next thing to do would be simply on the new report we're creating is set the data source as data, and then the report designer itself, we want to set or we actually want to call open report, passing in our new report. Now, in essence, that's as difficult as it should be to create a custom-bound report from anywhere, from any custom binding. We look here, we've got we didn't name it anything, but our bar button item 2. I click this. We've got our brand new report. We've still got our toolbox.
And over there we have a very limited set of fields.
So if I drag first name, last name, year of birth, bring this up and do a print preview, there's our data.
Right.
It's not directly hitting the database. Everything's good. If we come along and save that, and let's just say, call it in the debug window, why not? We'll call it JB report.
Okay.
And now we close it. This is where it starts to get a little interesting, because if I try and open that now, my report definition is there.
We've lost our field list.
We've lost our field list, and we've got no data to actually preview.
Right.
So straight away we're thinking, well, okay, what do we got to do to get around this? What's interesting with this solution I'm going to show you is that you can also use it for binding to custom data sets, multiple data sets, depending on, say, the report file name. You might have a weekly report or a monthly report. You can do some really nice things with manipulating the data on the way through.
Okay.
But what we want to do is have a look at the design panel loaded method. So to do that, I'm going to need the report designer control and the design panel loaded event. And in here, I need to do a little bit of typecasting. So I'm going to use a DevExpress dot extra reports user designer, because that's the library that the XR design panel is sitting in. And we want the XR design panel. We'll call it panel. And we're going to typecast that.
Typecast the sender. I see what you're doing. I see.
So copy and paste that and bring in sender.
Right. Okay.
So I've now got an object that's ready for me to work with. At this point, I'm simply going to check for the panel.file name. And if that is equal to string.empty, then I'm going to return. I like to keep my if statements nice and full, because that way I can come back and do other things. I can invert it. Otherwise, what I want to do is report.data source.
So the panel's report data source equals, and this is going to be get player data, isn't it?
Absolutely. Data layer, get player data.
All right.
Now, with that, I can run that example again.
Okay.
This time, when I choose open, JB report, we can see that we have our field list is back.
Okay, the report is there, and we can do a print preview and get exactly the same report. Brilliant. Yeah.
Now, it could be, with this, a couple of things I want to show. One is the calculated field. With a calculated field, I might want to say full name. If I edit the expression, what I want to do is just bring in first name, a blank space, and then last name.
Right.
which of course is going to be a little bit cleaner than having first and last names on my report.
Right.
Drag that back across.
A bit bigger.
Preview.
There we go. Oh yeah, it looks a little neater.
Rather than columns.
Yeah.
The other thing I might want to do is add a user parameter. Now the parameter might be year. I'm going to use it as an int, default value, and there's a whole swag of other things you can do here. We'll keep it nice and simple. I've now got a parameter. If I go to print preview, you can see on the right hand side my report doesn't get bound until I submit a value. I'm not doing anything with it yet.
Okay.
So go back to designer, and inside here, I can do a filter string. I can say where year of birth
Equals or greater than or
is greater than or equal to. I can choose this little value, which will give me my parameter.
Okay.
And click OK. Now when I preview, and I can say 1980, submit.
And you just get the ones where who
it matches.
or is greater than. Yes.
Is greater than. Of course, at this point, I could come into my grouping and sorting. I'm just showing you some really quick functionality here. Add a group, year of birth, descending, bring that in, preview, 1980. And of course, the end users get those parameters passed to them in the report viewer, whether it be desktop or web, which is really quite nice. So there's a lot you can do with user parameters. When it comes to the website, I've found it really useful to interact with things like query string parameters and passing that into the control. So you can have buttons on your website that automatically build the parameter in the query string. And so there's some nice things to play with. So at that point, we've shown you how quickly you can build the report designer, generating a standard report, generating reports bound to custom datas, and playing around with parameters. I'll say no to that one. So we could do the same thing when it comes to the actual dashboard designer. In fact, what we can do here is add a new Windows form, and we'll call this one JB -des.
All right.
Like we did with the report designer, I'm going to go and look for some controls, and I've got my dashboard designer. You'll note that there's only one.
Oh, that's right. Before you had two. You had the one which had the
toolbars,
buttons, toolbar, and the other one with the ribbon. Here, I just saw.
So what we can do inside the smart tag is nominate whether I want to create a ribbons or a bars one here.
Okay.
And again, the templating will just go along in the background and start to do some of this stuff.
Okay, creates a ribbon, populates a ribbon.
Again, under 30 seconds, no code. And I've got a fully functioning end-user dashboard designer that I can ship with my product.
Right.
I could change the branding, make it look a little bit prettier for things that I might want to do. Let's go to Program and change this to JB-des.
Okay.
Let's see what happens when we run that. All right, we've got our dashboard designer. I can come through and I can create a dashboard as you'd expect. Nothing taxing with that. Both, some people will build a mini interface that has both the dashboard and the report designer in one. They might ship separate X's, entirely up to the user. But what we now want to do is say, well, we've seen how easy it was to add a custom binding to the report control. What do we need to do now for the dashboard control? And it's a little bit different, so we'll step through. That's the report designer.
No,
Dashboard designer. So once we're in the dashboard designer, there's a couple of methods that we want to play with. The first one is dashboard creating. So we'll just come in and create an event behind there.
Okay.
And the second one is data loading.
Okay.
So we'll create an event behind there. Now what we've got to do. The first part of this is going to be to set e.handled equals true. So this is just telling the event, hey, we're taking care of what's going on now. You don't need to stress. We're going to use a dashboard object, if I spell it right, dashboard object data source. And that would be called object data source, which I'm sure you'd come up with some smaller name.
Yes, I don't know. I hate typing, so you know.
Import the. Oh, is that why I'm doing all the work? And that's going to be a new equals
new, whatever it is.
So you're quick to pick up my typing, but you don't want to do any of it.
No. I hasten to add to everybody out there that Paul is using a Mac keyboard. And Mac keyboards
at arm's length.
At arm's length, yes.
All right, so now we're just going to set some properties on the object data source. And this is where it gets a little interesting. We're going to use the same data layer that we did before. It's probably not the best example for dashboards, but it gives you the idea. And at this point, we're going to have to say type of data layer player. And then we've got another property to set on the data source, which will be data member. At this point, I'm going to use as a string to say get player data. So you'll notice this is a little bit different to the way we did reports.
Yeah.
We're effectively saying the data source will be bound to the type of, so the class of player.
Right.
Then when you go looking for the data, via reflection, it's going to execute the get player data method. And so the last thing to do here would be dashboard designer.dashboard data sources, remembering that you can have multiple data sources in here, so data sources.add,
and we add our
object data source.
Okay.
The next one is going to be dashboard designer reload data. Oh dear. I think I have to go back to typing school, Julian. So that's setting up the object data source. It's doing all the work in the background. That's going to be using reflection to get all the different elements available, and then we're binding the data to it. Now the next thing to do is inside the loading event, and here it's a quick expression. We're going to check to say, is the data source name equal to object data source 1?
Whoa, where did we get that from?
So we're instantiating a new object data source.
Yep.
By default, it's going to have a name of object data source 1.
So we could set the name up there.
Absolutely. And it would probably be a best practice to do that, but you only give me an hour to do this stuff. e.data equals, and you've guessed it, data layer, get player data.
And done.
So now if we run the dashboard, and if the technology gods are feeling particularly nice, when I do a new dashboard, straight away,
look at that.
I've got my data source. I can come in
3 fields.
and I can start doing things like first name as a column, last name as a column, year of birth as a column. Or I could come along and say, give me a chart and give me a...
Year of birth would be the argument, no?
This is
going to be a bit weird, bit of a weird chart here.
Well,
look at that.
I'm actually thinking it would be almost better off that way. Anyway, if we were to get, it would be count. That's where I've gone wrong. It wouldn't, count.
Last name count. That's the problem about if your data is not geared towards dashboarding, then or charts in dashboards, then it's a little hard.
The cool thing there is the fact that you can use the same or similar concept for binding to custom elements. Now, one thing I just wanted to touch on here would be adding this information into a web page. So I'm going to come along, and here's my hybrid web page, which just happens to have a dashboard viewer built in it. So blank application, dashboard viewer.
Right.
At this point, I can come along and point it to whichever dashboard file I want, and it's going to run. In fact, we might just try that, see if that breaks anything. So set as start page, and we better set this as the startup project, and we'll run without debugging, which should make things a little faster.
And we built, and we load the ASPX page from our local web server, eventually, starting up the web server, and there we go. Yeah.
And there we have a dashboard. Here's one you prepared earlier.
Exactly.
Now, what I was saying before would be you can actually interact with these dashboards or with your page in a sense, maybe by passing in parameters such as, I don't know, company equals ABC. It's not going to do anything on this dashboard, but it's certainly very powerful, very useful if you want to hide information. And typically, it might be that you've got a standard web page that has a dashboard control. So if we just move back to source, and maybe in another div it has, let's see if this is going to work today, Julian. Not data grid, but grid, so it's the ASPX grid control.
Grid view, okay.
Drag that in. It's looking more promising.
Calculating way, there it goes.
So you'd have a data grid, and it could be that you want to hide the dashboard viewer on certain terms, such as, I don't know, if you've got divisions inside your company, right, and you're wanting to pass a division to the web page, but you don't have a chart that applies to every division.
Okay. Just
throwing ideas around. So what you would then need to do, and none of this is rocket science, I mean, most of our users would be able to cope with this, would be maybe something like this. Let's say create a new string called company, and we would set that to be a request query string and company. Of course, you'd add validation in to make sure it existed and other things.
Right.
I've got a dashboard viewer. Actually, my dashboard data source. I would set the select command.
Right.
And that would allow me to change the data source as to where that data is going to come from. So it could be I'm passing in a parameter of, hey, change the data source for the company or do other things.
Okay.
If I just wanted to hide the actual dashboard viewer itself, I might say, for example, string dash path is equal to server map path, string formats, say app data, and then
0 and
dot XML, passing in company.
Yeah, gotcha.
Then I can say, okay, if not system.io.file.exists dash path, put enough brackets there.
Yep.
Whatever my dashboard viewer dot visible equals false. And of course I could short that by just saying view visible equals whether the file exists, etc. So there's certainly lots of ways you can interact with the dashboard control, with the report control, passing in either URL, so query string information, and keeping it so that your code is nice and clean and just working with different parameters.
So basically that's what that company in Sydney did with their wall-mounted monitors. It's the same web page they're going to, but they're just displaying stuff differently according to that. It's on a monitor versus on your PC.
Absolutely. And just quickly, what's interesting there is it's a full screen web page.
Right.
You don't see the browser.
That's true.
You don't see any scroll bars. Now, the trick with that was behind that, there is one PC driving two screens. So they've just got a thin, cheap client that's got the ability of driving a web browser.
Right.
The trick was, how do you run two web browsers full screen on two monitors automagically? It's not easy to do. You can't. So there's no quick kiosk mode for a browser. So that what we actually did, and I gave them a bit of a hand with it, is generated a WinForms application that used the embedded browser control in a windowless form that automatically, when it opens, positions those browser forms in full screen over each screen.
Beautiful.
and it's got a small configuration file that would refresh the page or boot to another page at any timeout. So not a lot of smarts. It wasn't rocket science, but it's got some really powerful application to do just that.
Right.
So now what we want to do, Julian, is come across and maybe get you to explain a little bit about the really cool new web dash designer. I was trying to think, web dash designer.
So yes, we've just announced this. It's available as a CTP in version 15.2.9, and it is a dashboard designer for the web, for ASP.NET Web Forms or MVC. So what we're going to do here is we're going to briefly show what this dashboard designer looks like. So Paul is going to create an empty ASP.NET application called Julian Rocks. I don't know why I didn't write this thing, because this is the team. And so we've created an empty web project. We'll just add a new web form and call it something interesting. And so we have it. Now we go find the dashboard designer and drag it into that nice div that's there ready and waiting for it. Jump into design mode. This actually does a couple of little things. It updates the DLL list for the dashboard designer, and it also updates web config to add a DevExpress section in there. And we've got to update that. In fact, it actually says on the dashboard designer page there, we need to reference required JavaScript libraries. So we have jQuery, globalize, globalize.cultures, and so we'll go to web config and we'll do exactly that. We'll embed the required client libraries to true.
So this is only if you don't already have those libraries in your project, or you don't want to add them manually.
All right. And obviously, it's just jQuery, and it's just globalized, and it's fairly easy to add those to your HTML page anyway. So next, let's add somewhere to get the data from. So we're going to be using Entity Framework here. So what's we need Entity Data Model. Yes, we'll add one of those. This is add data. So we're just adding the model here. We're going to be going to SQL Express, go to AdventureWorks, and we'll add a view, the salesperson view again, and we'll do some dashboarding on that. Next, we have to add the global application class, the ASAX class. Once we get,
Waiting for Visual Studio.
We're waiting for Visual Studio, are we? Oh, there we go.
That's not unusual.
Okay, so save that, and then add the global application class, ASAX, for the application start. Now it gets a little bit, I don't know, hairy. For a dashboard designer, we have to not only define where the templates are going to be saved, we also have to define how to get the actual data. So we've set up an entity framework model now for salesperson in AdventureWorks. So now we have to define all this to the web application. The first thing we're going to do is define where the dashboard templates are going to be saved. We're going to be creating, or the end user is going to be creating dashboards, and he's going to want to save them. So we're going to add the file storage option, dashboard storage equals, I'll have to add the relevant using statement equals new, please, not minus new. Paul's typing. I'm basically looking at what he's typing.
Waiting for Visual Studio.
And we're waiting for Visual Studio. So we have 3 people in this room: Paul, myself, and Visual Studio. And Visual Studio is being grumpy.
I thought that was the CTO's job.
Oh, to be grumpy. So dashboard storage.
Yeah, we need to pass in.
Oh, yeah, we need the folder name here.
So you said you wanted it in...
And app data. Notice, if you might, there is no app data created yet. We've got to create the folder in R.
We will create the folder in a second.
Okay, right. Dashboard designer, storage, we need to specify the storage area to be that dashboard storage. Okay.
So what you're saying is right now we should go off and maybe create...
Okay. Yep. We need to create that folder. It's a new app data folder. Beautiful. So now comes the fun bit. We need to set up the data source to point to our new entity framework model. So create a new EF data source for the dashboard. And we're going to pass in our data. That's our model name. Next up, we need to set the connection parameters for that. It's a new type of, isn't it, or something? I can't remember.
It is.
A type of the entities from AdventureWorks. And we have to specify the storage area for this model, or for the data from the model. We'll use in-memory storage here. And we need to register the data source. EF data source. Cool. And now, as the very last step, we tell all this stuff to the dashboard designer. So we need to set the data source storage to be our in-memory data storage, which in turn points to our model. And
Paul Mester made a mistake.
In-memory storage, data source storage, no, data source storage.
There we go.
There we go. Fantastic. So what we've done is we've defined the folder where our templates are going to be stored, and we've created that folder already. And then we do a lot of, I don't know, stuff to define the data model, set it as a data source for our dashboard, declare the storage where we're going to store the data for that model, and then tell the designer about it all. And we need to set a startup page to be our designer page.
And that's it.
And that's it.
So even though there's a couple of lines of code, 5 minutes, and you can be up and running with a
absolutely
client-side web dash designer.
Indeed. Well, let's see
web
it.
Dash.
Web dash.
I'm actually scared.
You're actually scared.
I'm wondering
so you're
what
going to do
I've missed
without
out.
debugging. Okay. Have faith.
It's my typing I don't have faith.
Oh, I see. Well, that's the point about IntelliSense. It tells you when you're wrong. So we're waiting for the... Okay, and here we are. Here's our dashboard designer running inside Chrome at the moment.
Now, apparently, just before we do step through this, there's been people trying to get it onto the webinar, and there's been a go-to-webinar problem.
Oh, really?
So a number of people, we've had some emails come in, and there's some comments coming through on questions. So we do apologize. We will find out what has...
And again, we shall be releasing this on our YouTube channel.
I have a slide on that.
You have a slide on that. We'll continue for now, but certainly if you've had difficulties getting into the webinar through GoToWebinar, our apologies, but you know it's a third-party system, so we're doing everything right. We're creating a new dashboard now. We're going to be using the Our data source. Beautiful. Let's have a chart. So already we can see the look and feel of the dashboard designer on a web page. So open up the options here. We're going to add values. What are we going to have values? We're going to have sales year to date. That'd be good. Arguments, the city. Let's have that. And so straight away we have a nice little bar chart showing the various cities and the year-to-date values for that chart. Let's add something else. Let's add. Go on, put a pie chart on. Put it. We've been having fun. I'm
Julian,
not a great fan of pie charts.
Julian hates pie charts.
I hate pie charts. I don't find them visually attractive, and stays. Oh no, we need to swap them.
Oh, but that one's so much prettier.
Oh yeah, lovely. The values. There we go. Now we've got. There we go. Fantastic. It's more like, I don't know. Can you see information out of that? You're having to estimate angles. That's about all you can estimate.
You can quite clearly see Cambridge and Nevada have higher percentages than San Francisco and Redmond.
But you're estimating areas and angles, and you know.
But
the issue here is not necessarily pie charts are good or bad or whatever. It's the fact that we are within a web page here, and we're getting the same kind of look and feel and Julian's pie look and feel and abilities, features as in what Paul was showing you earlier on in the WinForms dashboard designer. Very nice. And now we have a ring.
I called it a donut.
A donut. Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Let's throw in a quick grid at the bottom. So let's have some columns. City. What have we got? The sales quota. We have year to date and sales last year. Okay. And we need. That's good. We need a sparkline on that one, I think. Okay. We're not really showing.
It's not doing what it did earlier, but that's okay. People get the idea.
So here we have a grid. We can move the dashboard items around. They each have a. Oh, you're putting in some text. Click on one, move it around, put it in another place, and that's the really nice thing about the web dashboard designer is you can give this to anybody who has a browser essentially. So Julian's dashboard with Pi. Julian is CTO. So save. If we hit save. Now we can go back to our project here, have a look at the app data folder, and there is the dashboard we just created at 3:51 a.m. You haven't even got your time zone set properly.
Well, I'm not sure what time zone I'm in anymore.
And there is the XML defining the dashboard template.
So really cool. It works.
So it's a CTP. It's not quite released. It'll be a CTP for the customer technology preview CTP for version 16.1. It's there at the moment in 15.2.9. So please try it out, use it, play around with it, give us feedback, tell the support team any issues you discover, and we'll be grateful. And we'll release it later on in the year as a full-blown product or full-blown control. Let's have a look at the questions here.
Well, I'm going to read these out to you, Julian.
Oh, you're going to read them out to me. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so Jacko said grouping with charts still requires scripting. Any reason for that? I have to defer that to you or support.
That was going to be a support question. I don't know.
What I would like is if you can email me directly on that, so we can have a look at either any tickets that you've got open or. Now Michael's actually written War and Peace, So he ends with, if that's too much, can I can write support. So is it possible in the data source wizard to integrate its own dialog to open files? The short answer is yes. There is already some examples in the support center of how to manipulate the new chart wizard. And certainly if your scenario is outside what is there, then the team would like to hear. But I know right now that you can skip some of the dialog windows, you can nominate your own connection strings or data sources at that point. Will we show something about the dashboard editor in the web? We just did.
Yep.
Evan, sorry that you had connection problems. There'll be certainly...
Again, quickly show the next slide, because that's where you have the...
The next slide?
The next slide?
Oh, that one.
Oh, yeah. So go to youtube.com/DeveloperExpress. You can see later on today, well, in a few hours, let's put it like that, a couple of hours, you'll be able to see this webinar on our YouTube channel. So using that particular YouTube channel, you can also see all of the tutorials that we have. There is a simple demo of the web dashboard designer up there on our channel, so have a look at that as well.
But download the trial or download the 15.1.9.
15.2.
Sorry, 15.2.9.
Yeah.
A question, Kevin, is there a dashboard designer for ASP.NET MVC? Now, my understanding, and I might get kicked here, is that...
At the moment, it's just web forms. So the MVC version should be along soon.
I was on an internal communique the other day, and I was told that the controls we have on 16.1 are going to be available for both web and
MVC.
MVC, okay. But
my memory is not that good.
Well, you were actually on the flight when that one was happening.
Oh, I see. Oh, right.
Okay.
It, so. Okay.
Some queries from Aaron. How do I? Is it possible to localize for different languages? I'm not sure if you mean the new the web forms dashboard designer, or in general. In general, yes, we have localization. If you mean the new one, then not yet. There was a question about conditional formatting. Once 16.1 is released and we get a more up-to-date preview version, then I think we're going to see more functionality, in there. The thing that drives this particular control is obviously all the feedback we've received on the Windows version, or the... Yes, I don't look at the next... I'll be questioned. I'm sure that there's going to be an XAF comment. Julian's looking at me with horror.
Can the dashboard designer for the web be used in XAF?
Is there stored procedure supporting EF data source? Well, I know about EF data source, but the standard data source wizard allows you to connect to a stored procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, folks, I'm not a big fan of Entity Framework. I like doing my own data layers and things. So.
Yep, I'm not an expert, so I can't say.
Do you have the ability to automatically scroll a grid if it exceeds the display? So you can scroll a grid via some JavaScript, but a word of caution here, because it is going to be a hack. At what speed do you want the grid to scroll? At what point, how do you determine when it gets to the bottom? What happens at that point? Is it supposed to go back to the top? So, Mike, if you could maybe drop me or Julian.
I'm kind of puzzled. What do you mean?
So you imagine there's a big dashboard on the screen,
okay, and
you've got too much data that fits in the grid. We want the grid to automatically just scroll up, showing the rest of the data.
Holy cow!
Or maybe automatic paging or something like that. But the question then would be, if that's implemented, would it go back to the start? Think about last time you hired from Hertz, and you've got your gold display. If there's more than one page of people, it wraps onto another page and keeps rotating.
I'm personally thinking of flight details at the airport, and it shows you one page, and then like 5 seconds later it shows you the next page.
But is that a use case for a dashboard or a grid, or?
All right, so that's a use case for a grid.
You
I
can
suppose the dashboard grid, we could, well, set it up and get it to work like that. I'd have to say that's a new feature. We'd have to look into it and see what we can do as part of the basic set of controls.
Now, I've got to be careful because some of the questions that are coming in, I'm not sure whether people are talking about dashboards in general or the web designer. So, Alessandro, if your question is relating to dashboard or data sources in general, yes, you can, or the question is it possible to retrieve information from custom objects that do not use XPO or EF? Yes, I mean, we showed that example before with our little custom data access layer. For the web, then, not at this stage, but again, we're CTPing this. How can we pass user parameters from one dashboard page to another? So it is possible via some JavaScript to get hold of some information. For this one, Paul, I'd like to know more about your scenario. So you're talking about drill downs. If you've got dashboard A and you've got a parameter that you want to pass that parameter to dashboard B, why do you need a separate dashboard? Can't you use the items on the same? I've been playing around with actually having the dashboard interaction with other external ASP controls. So, for example, our data grid. So I think what we'll do there is a blog post in the coming weeks that shows you some examples on that. We are fast running out of time, but there's a ton,
1 minute left.
There's a ton of questions left to go. So, Julian, how do you feel about responding to some of these people?
I think we'll have to do it through a blog post or something like that, where we basically pose the question, get the support team to help us out with, or the actual development team to help us out with the answers.
So, rock, paper, scissors as to who writes it.
Yeah, I can write it. No worries. Yeah,
I love it.
Okay.
But
with all these things, if you have some very detailed questions, probably neither Paul nor I are better delve deep into that kind of question. So best bet is support@devexpress.com for those kind of questions. Here we're showing our own email addresses. So Paul, you at devexpress.com and Julian B at devexpress.com, or ping us through Twitter.